Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? How are you guys doing today? Thank you guys for being here. This is the very first time that I'm doing this type of a stream. Usually, when I do it on my channel, it's usually a pop up, and it's usually something that's totally improvised and off the cuff. Not that this really isn't off the cuff, but there was a little bit more of a trying to find somebody to be a guest and have an interesting conversation. I know this is Dr. Anthony's regular time slot, and this is not going to be a regular time slot for this project that I'm working on. It just so happened that this was available at this time. So, but I do have to figure out a time that works best, where trying to respect other people's streams and that works with my work schedule. Because as you guys all know, I work a rotating schedule, and it's always a little bit hectic in that aspect. But this is something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. It's something that I think is important that we do, because to me, um, I can remember the first time where somebody allowed me to be a guest on their stream and how it helped my channel. Uh, and I'm trying to pay that forward, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this stream with Mexicali and in the end is because I'm hoping to have a new guest every other time that I do this. Like I said, I just still haven't worked out the details as to a time uh, and a date that I'm willing to commit to. But I will try to, when I do it, I will try to put it out in advance for a few couple of days, so that if you guys want to join me, then you guys have that opportunity. And so before we get started, let me start off with saying some hellos and get that going. I want to thank Jimmy P for being here. Silver Creek Aquatics, thank you for being here. Our aquarium, our aquatic universe, or as Funk would say, our aquatic university. Uh, Thank you for being here. Craig's Catfish, thank you. Mark Storlson, Mark, thank you very much. You're my first super chat I've ever had, so thank you. You will always be, you always hold a special place in my heart. You're my first. And let's see who else we have here. Amisa, hey, hello, Amisa. Thank you for joining us. Well, as you guys could saw in the thumbnail, I am very fortunate to have with me today Todd from TJAutocross. If you missed the stream that he did with Rico Stan, I highly recommend you guys go back and watch it. I know I just recently went back and watched it, because one of the things that I don't want to do is have a repeat of that. And so I want to pick up on some of the things that he didn't discuss at that time, and hopefully be able to have that conversation today, so you guys get to know Todd a little bit better. And without further ado, well, let me bring Todd up with us. Hey, Matt, thanks for being here. Hey, Todd, how's it going?
Hey, Jorge, great. How are you? Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to be here. I'm
Oh
excited.
no, thank you for accepting. Because without having a guest, this would have been a little bit awkward. It would have been me and me. Hey, Rocket, ¿cómo estás? Benjamin, thank you for being here. Uh, yeah, so this is the first time you're the first guest that I've had in this format. Um, and really what it is just trying to have a conversation, trying to get to know the person with the channel, and just the typical questions that get asked, but hopefully not trying to repeat some of the stuff you've already answered. So, you know, with that, what's always been interesting to me, and I kind of know the answer to this, but your name really came across because of when I saw TJ Autocross, that really jumped out to me. I'm sort of a car enthusiast, so I wasn't really sure when I saw that where you were referencing to doing some of the racing that it's involved with autocross, or it was just happened to be a coincidence of words. And so, do you want to let us in a little bit as to the name, even though just kind of refresh our memory as to why it is TJ Autocross?
Yeah, absolutely right. So your intuition was correct. I have been for about the last 10 years competing and doing different forms of motorsports. The first one of them that I spent the majority of that time, probably about 8 years, was autocross, in fact. I Yeah, I had always been interested in basically anything automotive. I grew up in a family that was very much involved in the auto industry. I had many of my family members that did their own forms of motorsports long before I was born, but I was born into a family that just had that kind of interest. And it was shortly after my wife and I moved here to New Jersey that it was a conversation where she said, you need to kind of find a hobby, right? We had moved, I think like I had talked about on the focus on, right? I had lived in 8 states. And so that means basically every couple of years a move, and you don't really get a chance to sort of build a community around yourself. And so, my wife and I both wanted to find things that we were interested in that we could go do and, start to build that community, start to have that outlet when we weren't, doing our 9 to 5 type of work, right? And I had just always wanted to participate in some form of motorsports. When I was a little boy, I fantasized about being a race car driver, like as a profession. And, to do that today, right, in today's world, you have to come with some serious financing. You probably have had to start when you're, single digits age wise. And I was 32 or so years old when we moved here. So none of those things could be true at that time, right? So I found a local club, and I like to say that I came there for the racing and I stayed for the people.
Okay.
I have just met some of the most incredible people through autocross, and now that I've transitioned into the track, it's been kind of the same. So I competed locally here in New Jersey and just over the river in what we call the Philadelphia region of the Sports Car Club of America. And in that time, I had some decent success, right? So I did it for 8 years, and I think I had probably 4 of those years I had class championships that I was able to earn, right? And then did a little bit of touring around the country for the Sports Car Club of America to do some national events. So just a great opportunity. I just, like I said, met some amazing people, had some really great times. Saw some of America's most wonderful large parking lots and old airports, because that's basically where they hold those events, right? It's you have to be going there with that purpose, right? And it's been great. And then this last 2 years, I've switched over, and now I go to actual racetracks, kind of throughout the sort of Northeast Mid Atlantic.
So, of all the different racing styles, what was it about autocross that attracted you? Because you have drag racing, you have circuit racing, you even have the cross country races that they do. Uh, you have the time races, which is kind of like the Pikes Hill and stuff like that. What was it about autocross? Is it something that you're more thrilled about the skills that it takes to drive a vehicle? Because isn't autocross more of a skill event versus well, you still have to have reaction, but like in drag racing, it's all about reaction. How quickly you can get off the line. What was the appeal of autocross for you?
Yeah, so I think it's often been viewed, and it still is today, right? It's really the entryway into motorsports. You can show up with kind of any old car, right? So my first autocross car was a 1998 Dodge Neon. Nothing
Oh, okay.
fancy, right? I went out and it was less than $2,000 to buy the car and do a little bit of modification, different tires and things like that, and it was kind of ready to go. So I viewed it as a great way to get into a motorsport. It also wasn't wheel to wheel, so the risk isn't as high, right? Your
Okay.
speeds aren't as high. You're not out there with another car, and it just seemed like a very approachable way to get into motorsports to me.
Now, is there different classes that you race? Do they have like I guess a novice and then a semi-pro and then a pro and stuff like that in autocross, or is it just an open field and anybody can come in and do their thing?
Yeah, so most clubs will start you out in a novice group. And the goal there is really that they've got people that are really experienced and that are instructors.
Okay.
So, they identify you as a novice. They usually make sure that there's an instructor that can jump in the car with you, because I think everybody goes there, myself included, with this idea that we're going to be like fantastic from day one. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's a very specific type of skill, to the point that you made, that you have to build up, and you have to get used to the fact that your car is a lot more capable than you ever will test on the street, right? And you need someone who knows that to be riding in your right seat, to be able to tell you, like, you didn't need to hit the brakes there, right? So it starts there, and then it kind of becomes open class, right? So that's anybody, men and women, can compete. They're on the level playing field, and the cars are just grouped by performance potential and how much modification you've done.
Okay.
So that's kind of how they split it up.
So is there a trend as to which vehicles seem to perform better, or is it doesn't matter? It's really just driver skill.
So I will tell you, the number one is always driver skill.
Mhm.
Always driver skill. But there are definitely, the way in which they class cars, there are usually 1 to 3 kind of dominant cars in the class. And the challenging thing, and one of the reasons that I kind of got out of it, was if you were in some of the less modified classes, what they consider kind of their street classes,
Okay.
you go into that because you're not looking to spend a huge budget on modification. But the issue becomes, as every manufacturer creates another generation of cars, if there's something that's interesting to that community, they got to figure out a place to put them. And eventually, the cars of prior generation, they kind of get buried. And
Okay.
so it's like every 3 years, you kind of have to start over. And I got to a point where I was 8 years in, and I'm competing nationally, right? I want to go for a national championship at some point, or, to try to get there, which is a tall task. And you've got to bring the best hardware. And in order to do that, every couple of years you're buying a new car, and it got kind of crazy to me. So I just sort of got to a point where it just stopped making sense.
So I know racing, all racing in general, is pretty expensive, but where
Mhm.
does this fall in comparison to the other racing sports? Is this more a little bit pocket friendly, where you can still be very competitive without a lot of investment, or is it like all racing where you just really have to spend the money?
Yeah. So I think if you want to just go and have fun locally with your friends, right, and do the maximum of what you and your car are capable of, it's very friendly. I think you can find, depending on where you are in the country, to participate in an event is probably $50. Could be a little bit around here. It's a little higher. We're in a major metro area. We get, people from all over the place that would come in and participate, and the sites are more expensive. And so, in a situation like that, you could come with your daily driver and compete and have fun. There's a place for you to do it. So it definitely, is a great entry point. I think the thing that you have to be honest with yourself is, are you going to be satisfied with that? And I wasn't, right? I wanted the car that could compete, and I wanted the best tires and the best modifications, and that's where the stuff starts to add up, right? So I think it's still, compared to other forms, is still less expensive, but it can get very expensive depending on kind of where you're wanting to take it.
So you touched on it a little bit. So some of the very basic upgrades you can do. Obviously, you're going to look at tires, because tires are going to play a big factor on that. What would be some other very inexpensive upgrades that most people will do to their vehicles? Because obviously you can take your street car, but I'm assuming that you're going to want to do a little bit of improvements so you can better your times. What would some of those changes look like?
Yeah, so I would say the basics are brake fluids and brake pads, right? So something that's
Okay.
a little higher temperature on the brake fluid, just to make sure, especially if you get to some of those national events, the courses are much longer, your speeds do tend to get higher. And the thing about autocross is, that they have a formula of what the course is supposed to kind of look like, and it can't exceed certain limits. And so what that tends to mean is you may be going 65 miles an hour, depending on the car, could be a little higher. And then you're going to go into a place where you have to make a very drastic and very slow turn. So you are getting on the brakes very late and very hard. So in a hotter time of year, the fluid helps so it doesn't boil. And then the brake pads just give you a different feel in the pedal, so it may give you a little more confidence. I think those are probably the basic ones that are still pretty affordable beyond tires. And then you can look at things like different sway bars and things like that, depending on what you feel like the suspension of the car is kind of telling you.
Now, are all the courses set up very similar, or they change from race to race?
Yeah, so you will likely never see the same course twice in your entire autocross career. There's only so much they can do with it, so you're going to see elements that are very similar, but they're going to have connected to different elements that are totally different, right? So it's going to be something that just it's always different, and there's no practice.
Oh, yeah, because how do you prepare for a course that you don't know what's going to be?
Exactly. Yep.
So, um, so you get into a hobby, which obviously there's some adrenaline involved in this, and some emotions that go behind it. How does fish keeping become a part of a hobby that you also do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So fish keeping for me started extremely early. When I was really young, we're talking single digits. My parents would buy kind of what we race on dirt or pavement. Mike B wants to know. Yeah, so I race on pavement. I've never raced on dirt. Not that I necessarily wouldn't, but at this point, that's not something that I'm doing. So fish keeping, yeah. So when I was like single digits of age, my parents did the thing again that we now know not to do, which is buy the 1 gallon bowl and you put the goldfish in it. And so it started there. But as you'd imagine, those goldfish didn't last very long, right? You take them out every week. You start the tank from scratch. I mean, there's no cycle. There's no nothing. And so it kind of died after a while. Being a kid, after so many of the fish die, you sort of like, well, this is kind of lousy. And then I think it was third grade. I had a teacher that taught science, and she had tanks in her classroom. And for whatever reason, I was fascinated, right? I just thought it was the neatest thing. She had a saltwater tank. She recognized that I was interested, and then set up a freshwater tank. She put a pair of crebensis in it because she wanted to show me their interesting parental behaviors. And I just was absolutely captivated by the fish and just thought this was the coolest thing. And I think that's at the point where I started talking my parents' ear off when I'd get home from school about these fish. And I'm not sure they really exactly understood what I was talking about until they met the teacher. And then they were like, okay, now we get it. And so we got our first fish tank. We had a nice community tank in the living room of the house. And I'd sit there and watch them. And even to this day, I can sit and watch the tank, and I drift off. Like I don't fall asleep, but like I get into like this very restful kind of state, just watching the fish do their thing. And it's been one of those things. I read Tropical Fish Hobbyist in those days, like cover to cover. It would show up in the mail, and of course, I should be doing my homework, right? But I sat down and I'd have a snack after school, and I'd read the whole thing, um, and that's where I got kind of my interest in wanting to breed fish. And so one tank in the living room turned into, I think, 3 more in the basement, and I started breeding African cichlids, all sorts of different cichlids. And that stuck with me all the way through until I got ready for college, and then it was too much.
Yeah.
And so I had to give it up, and then found my way back as an adult in, I think it was 2020. And it was from a YouTube video of all things. I just happened to be looking in my YouTube feed, and there was a thumbnail, and it was a video from Primetime Aquatics when they were doing a fish room tour.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, look at that. It's a fish tank. I had those as a kid. Like that, let me just check this out and see what a YouTube video about fish would be like. And that was over. Like all of the memories as a kid came coming back. And I was like, that's it. I told my wife, I was like I want to do this again. And thankfully she was like, yeah, go for it.
Well, it's interesting that you pick your hobbies that you're picking are some that could get pretty expensive real quick.
Yeah, that is not wrong. Yeah, as it started out with one fish tank, and now I think I've got technically 7 if you count like quarantine tanks and stuff like that.
So going back to when you were looking at those magazines,
Hmm.
what did you? Obviously, you started breeding African cichlids. Were those the fish that initially you wanted to breed, or was there a fish that when you got interested that you said, "Oh, I want to get these fish"?
Hmm. Yeah. So they were not it.
Mm-hmm.
So I initially had this fascination with killifish, which to this
Oh,
day I still haven't kept, but I want to. I think they're beautiful and so interesting. But I remember reading the articles because at this point we're talking. This was probably late 80s, early 90s, right? And so there wasn't a ton of info, and people would talk about how they were keeping fish and breeding fish. But what ended up really captivating me was Egyptian mouth brooders.
oh,
And,
okay.
right. And so my mom and I went down to the local pet store and I told the guy, listen, like I've got this magazine and they've talked about breeding Egyptian mouth brooders. Can you get me some? And he was like, nope. But he was like, I do know a guy that's leaving the area and he's liquidating his fish room. He's a breeder and he was a breeder of African cichlids, mostly Tanganyikan, but had a few different things. And so the first fish that I got from him and bred was shell dwellers. So the brevis shell dwellers, so which still exist are pretty plentiful in the hobby today.
Yes.
But yeah, I just was absolutely just I thought they were really cool how they lived in the shells, and so as a probably 10 or 12-year-old kid at that point, I was like, yep, sign me up. And so I bred them for a number of years.
So, have you ever belonged to a fish club or anything like that, or have you always been just an independent fish keeper?
Yeah, no, so I joined after I started keeping fish again as an adult just a few years ago. I did join the North Jersey Aquarium Society.
Okay.
And so I've been a member there. Yeah, I think this will be coming up to 2 full years that I've been a member of the club. Great organization. I've been to a couple of other fish club events and just the community again, right? It seems like the hobbies that I pick are I go for the hobby and I stay for the people, and I feel like my fish club is no different, right? We've got some great people that have been in the club for a very long time and they're willing to offer advice and they bring some really neat stuff. Our club does one meeting every month. It's like the third Saturday of the month, and it includes usually a guest speaker and an auction. And you can find some really cool, kind of rare, unique stuff there. So just lots of fun. I really it definitely adds to my hobby.
So, in your club, uh, it's fair to say then that there's a great variation of fish that are kept. It's not like, for example, here in Arizona, and I think it has to do a lot with the water quality. African cichlids is what dominates the hobby down here. It seems like everybody that I come across is heavily into African cichlids. Up there, do you get a little bit more of a variation of species, or
Yeah, big variation of live bearers, killifish, all sorts of different egg scatterers. We do get cichlids, but a lot of the stuff that shows up is like Care species things. So it's fish that are been evaluated by that organization as being some version of threatened or potentially extinct in the wild, and the people that have been in the club that are part of the breeder awards program tend to find these species and breed them and then bring them back to the club so they can claim their points. So a ton of variety. You never really know what's going to show up every month, and you never know the volume. I tend to help out with the auctions, and so I kind of run for them where I bring the fish out and announce what the lot number is, and then take it to whoever wins and collect the cash. And you never know. Is it going to be, 90, different lots, or what it's going to be? It's always really, just really exciting to see sort of what shows up.
Any interest in probably getting a little bit more involved and forming part of the what do they call it, the board?
Yeah, so they've approached to ask if I would, because I do help out at the meetings and do a few different things. I've I probably will at some point, but I just got off about a 5 or 6 year stint on the board of one of our racing clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to take kind of a breakaway. I was in a secretary position with that club, which had some responsibilities beyond just going to kind of a monthly meeting and helping to make decisions. And so I wanted to take a little bit of time before I jump back into something like that. But in the future, it'll probably happen.
Okay. Now, you said you have about 7 aquariums set up right now, right?
Hmm.
What are you keeping in them currently?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got 2 aquariums, two 20-gallon, the normal 20-gallon highs. And those currently have my original breeding group of Tinichthyes kunai,
Okay.
which is I mentioned it again in the stream with Rico, that it is one of the fish that showed up at the auction. I guess it would have been a bit more than a year ago that I've had them, and they are a white cloud species from Vietnam. One that was discovered in like 2009. Researchers went back and then found them in 2017. And then they were described officially at the end of 2019. And
Okay.
at this point, their status in the wild is not really known. At least from the research I've been able to do, it seems like researchers haven't found them in the same place again. So I'm really excited to have. I've got the parents, and then I've got the other 20 has a group of babies that were born. I guess in the summer tub last year,
Okay.
that I'm continuing to grow up. They seem to grow fairly slowly, and trying to build up a nice little population here so that I can continue to produce them. Because again, not knowing what their status is in the wild, I want to make sure that we can hopefully have a nice population in our aquariums.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really familiar with the fish, so can you give me a little bit of description? How big do they get? What
Mhm.
their temperament?
Yep. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, they're similar to other white clouds, right? So not a very big fish. They're probably max size is about 2 inches.
Okay.
They're a different coloration. So they are often called the yellow white cloud. They've got their finnage is a mix of the dorsal and the anal fins tend to be yellow.
Okay.
And the males have like a white edging to the anal fin, and then their tails are like a bright red, the males being brighter than the females, and they've got 2 lines down the side of their body. One is like it's like a dark blue to a black,
Oh,
and
okay.
then below it is a line that is it glows, right? So when it hits the right light, it shows up like a silver, and then in more dim light, it's just kind of a white line. A great little fish. I've got 6 adults that I've had all this time. They live, very peacefully in that tank. They are clearly, in my experience, they are keyed off of plants to spawn.
Okay.
And so the reason that I found that out is when I was keeping them as they were continuing to grow, as they got to kind of mature size, I was feeding them one night, and I have hornwort that covers the top of the tank.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that a couple of them went up into the hornwort, and all of a sudden I saw eggs fall.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
right. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, that's really interesting. And as soon as they started falling, the others swarmed on them. They were gone. Right. So they are voracious eaters of eggs and their fry. They don't mess around. In fact, the babies that I've got that I've been growing up in the other tank, I had also started to breed them indoors, starting in the early part of this year, and I put some of their younger siblings in with them, and I thought they were safe enough, and they were not. They ate them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they're no joke. If it fits in their mouth, they're going to take it down in a hurry. And so it's kind of created a little bit of a fry survival issue for me. I've got a method that kind of works pretty well to collect the eggs, and then I was trying to keep the breeder box far too clean,
Oh,
and
okay.
it looked good, and I was like, okay, well, I want to keep it healthy, and make sure there's not things that are rotting, and they actually have survived better if I leave it a little bit. I think there must be things that grow that, as they're so small, they can pick off, and it seems to help. So I'm going to probably in the fall sort of restart that breeding procedure and see if I can't build up my stock a little bit more successfully.
So do you find them to be like seasonal breeders, or they'll breed year round?
Year round, if I put the little egg trap that I created, which is basically just a little Tupperware container, maybe about that tall, kind of square, with some river rocks and some sort of plant in there, I leave it for 2 days and there'll be eggs in the bottom of it.
I noticed that on TJ Autocross, you don't
Hmm.
have any videos pertaining to keeping fish.
Hmm.
Are you thinking about in the future putting content on this channel, or are you looking to go and open a different channel? Do you have any plans for that?
Yeah, so I have just recently started adding videos to the channel, but it always had started as a place for me to house videos for my own training purposes. I can learn a lot of stuff about autocross and now driving on the track by watching old videos. And the benefit of doing it for the track is the track doesn't really change. With an autocross, you never were going to see the same course twice. So you can learn and figure out sort of where the edge of grip is and things like that. But, you can only approximate because the next course you were going to see was different. Where now I'm going back multiple times in a season to the same tracks, and I'm really able to take those videos and see what corners was I not doing as well and focus on them in the next time that I'm there. So I'll continue to put some videos up there to just show sort of what I'm doing. And again, use it for my own kind of personal training. When it comes to fish keeping, I don't have any aspirations at this point of putting anything out there. I came to what I now know, obviously, as the fish fam, first for research, but again, the community is what kept me, right? And so that's why for all these couple of years that I've been involved, that I have wanted to stay around and be part of these, the live streams, usually as a chatter, but now most recently in the last couple of weeks here as part of a live stream, which that actually has added a whole new level of interest for me. I've really enjoyed being on the live streams and having these conversations. I think is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, and it's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about it, because it gives you that interaction with other people that are doing similar things to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, Especially for me, because kind of it's always been where I've lived and been in the hobby. I haven't had that opportunity to connect with people locally because they don't have any clubs, or the hobby itself is more personal.
Yep.
People don't know who's keeping what, or who are the fish keepers in the community that you're living in.
Yep.
And that's how, for me, it's very similar to what happened to you. I had gone away from the hobby, and when I came back, was through YouTube, watching some videos, and all of a sudden, it's almost exactly what happened to you. It's like, oh, I remember what this was like, and I started up again, and it doesn't. It always seems to be the same group of channels that we all start with, because they're the prevalent ones. They're the ones that are out there. They're putting a lot of the information, and the production is pretty good, so that it makes it very entertaining to watch.
Yep.
Uh, but then, like you fall into that rabbit hole, and you start going deeper and deeper and deeper, and you start discovering all these other people that are involved within the hobby. And for me, it was great because it allowed me to connect with other
Yeah.
people that are doing similar things to me,
Yeah.
and that's what I really enjoyed.
Yeah. And then for me, right, what took it to another level was last year at the Clash. So the Keystone Clash, the event that we have in September in Pennsylvania, which is coming up again here, and I think it's like 90 days or so, something like that. And being able to see people and meet them in person, it just again it took it to another level. I really enjoy the community and the people that are involved, and talking fish for 2-3 days, and just a great time. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to do it again. But yeah, I think I kind of have in my head sort of the schedule of live streams that I attend as much as I possibly can throughout the week, and it adds a new element for me for the fish keeping, and I'm fortunate that I found it.
So, do you see yourself in the future trying to keep other species of fish besides the ones you have now? Or right now, or is it only white trouts that you're keeping, or what else
No,
do you have?
I realized I didn't totally answer your question, right? So that's two of the tanks, and then I've got a couple of tanks of Tanganyikan cichlids. So I've got a tank of multi-shell dwellers, which those guys are super cool, right? I mean, they're not rare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, you and Maritza, I'm looking forward to having some time to hang out with both of you again, and just everybody. We had a great time. But so I've got the Maltese, and they are hysterical, right? They've been in the tank. They were the first tank that I got when I got back into the hobby a few years ago. And I knew I was interested in where I sort of felt like I started, right, when it came to kind of the breeding and having. At that time it wasn't Maltese, it was the Neolamprologus brevis, but I wanted to get back into the shell dwellers, and they'll have their little squabbles, and all of a sudden they'll take the sand and they build up the little wall so they can't see their neighbor, and it's like, I know that I left for work today and this was flat. You worked all day, and they're so small. They take these little mouthfuls of sand. Like, they had to put in a solid day's work to like make this thing. And it's crazy. So I love those guys. And then I've got a 29 gallon with four Paracyprochromis. They're a
Okay.
deep water fish from Lake Tanganyika, and they're called the neon blue. And so the males have in their fins and down the side, like their lateral line, is this bright neon blue color that glows under the light. And they have these giant eyes because, again, they're deep water fish. So I would assume that the light down there is not great, and they need the neon blue to attract the females for breeding. So they're upstairs in their own tank. Great fish. And
Yeah, I
then
don't think
I've
I'm familiar with those.
no,
I'm gonna have to
yeah,
look them
yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, they're awesome. They're pretty peaceful, but they get pretty big. The males are probably 4-ish inches,
Okay.
and the females are probably 2.5 to 3, something like that. But really neat, just kind of a cool fish. They school together and they squabble a little bit, right? But not too bad. And then I've got a 40 breeder that's my planted aquarium, and so I am not an aquascaper, right? So it is.
Both.
What's that?
You and me both.
Yeah. I have honestly, it's been a struggle sometimes to kind of keep the plants growing happily. But I've got a small group of the dwarf emerald danios. They're like the CPD cousins.
Yeah.
So I've got a small group of them. I've got a small group of the silver tip tetras. I've got a small group of Pristella tetras, the X-ray tetras. And then I've got Corydorus habrosus and panda loaches.
Okay.
And I also have a couple of black marble angelfish in that tank.
Oh, okay. So it's safe to
Uh,
say you tend to like the smaller fish in the hobby.
I do, yeah. The biggest fish that I've got are those Paracyprochromis at 4 inches, and the angels will obviously get big. Right now, they're still pretty small. They're a newer add to the tank here, so they're silver dollar-ish size. They were bred locally here, and found them, and they look great. So I was like, I haven't had angels since I was a little kid, so might as well add a couple to the tank. So yeah, but typically kind of the smaller stuff tends to be what I'm interested in. Like a lot of little fish, right? So
Mhm.
like schools of
Yeah.
little guys. It's just, to me, it's just pretty interesting to see their behaviors. And the dwarf emerald danios, the males, they kind of spar, like where they circle each other, and like nothing ever happens about it, but they act like they're awful serious. And so it's just kind of interesting to watch it happen.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to gravitate to the small. I'm of the opinion I like big tank, small fish.
Hmm.
The bigger the tank, where you can just have a multitude of different types of fish in there and see them interact. That's kind of where I enjoy my hobbies in that range there. Um, I do find the monster fish, they're attractive and all that, but I've never been a big fan of a one fish in one tank kind of deal. And
Hmm.
typically with those fish, is kind of almost what you're required to do. So, um, although I do enjoy them vicariously with other people keeping them. When it comes to my choice, it's the bigger the footprint of the tank, the more I'm going to be able to do with it,
Yeah.
and the more smaller fish I'm going to be able to keep in there and see their interaction. And that's
Yeah.
that's that's usually what I prefer.
Yeah, and I enjoy the behaviors.
Hmm.
Just watching, and I mean, I think it's probably you try as a human, you sort of try and relate to it, right? And I end up creating like these little narratives, which I'm sure are based in no fact whatsoever, right? But it's really fun to just sort of sit there and just wonder, what are they thinking? What are they doing, right? And they I'm sure they probably are like, okay, here comes the guy with the food, right? So let's everybody look happy. And yeah, I just I get really excited about just watching, and seeing what they do.
Now, being that you kind of told us what's in there, are there any fish that you're kind of hoping to be able to get in the future, be able to breed, or just keep for the sake of keeping? Do you have any like a little wish list or bucket list of fish that you would like to have?
Yeah, so the question did come up when I was talking with Rico on the Focus on. We talked about one fish, and it's probably one, honestly, I don't know that I'll ever have, because you do need a pretty sizable tank. And my biggest tanks right now are 40-gallon breeders, and that's probably as big as I'll go, just from a space perspective. But I do have an interest in Tanganyika featherfins. I think those would be really, really interesting. I also have an interest in a more attainable fish. I think some of the dwarf cichlids, not
Okay,
necessarily the Africans, right? So,
pistol
you know,
stuff.
yeah, like some of the pistos, or some of the derivatives of like the Kerbensis, right? So you think about the Malawi Kerbensis, or some of the Nigerian reds. Some of the Letacaras, and some of those things I think would be kind of interesting. I tend to probably gravitate a lot towards the cichlids, uh, but I haven't ventured very far. Like angelfish and rams are really the only South American, Central American types of cichlids that I've capped. So there's a lot of territory that I could still kind of cover, which I think someday I'd like to do some of that.
So is that something that you're eventually, once you become pretty proficient with breeding a certain fish and rotating it out, or are you looking to maybe expand the number of tanks that you have, or
It's probably will be more repurposing of tanks.
okay.
Yeah, so I think it'll be, if I get to a point like right now. So one of the tanks that I've had for quite a while now has been a multi-time shrimp failure. And for whatever reason, I've tried a few different varieties of Neocaridina, all the blue, but I've tried a number of different times to purchase small groups, and I only keep them alive for a very short time period. I cannot figure out what's going on. All the water parameters seem to be kind of what they expect. I don't know if they get bacterial infections, or what's going on. It seems like I do a water change, and that's kind of the beginning of the end for them. And so I've got that 10-gallon tank set up that there's nothing in it right now. So
Yeah, because for me, they're the opposite. They're like roaches. You can't get rid of
That's
them.
what a lot of people say, and I
Yeah.
have no idea, but it really seems to be. I go in, I do a water change, and
How often? Okay. Well, touching on that,
yeah.
which do you have a very strict regiment of maintenance that you do, or it's on a need basis? How do you manage your fish room?
Yep. Yeah. So with the shrimp, it was different, right? Because I noticed that they started to have issues. So I would tend to probably go a little bit longer and do a little bit less water change
Hmm.
percentage. With my other tanks that are all fish, I tend to do every 2 weeks, 50%.
Okay.
And that seems to be working quite well. The fish seem happy. I don't have die off. So I tend to keep pretty religious to that. Now if we go away or something like that and it's 3 weeks, it seems to be fine because none of my tanks are stocked to a super heavy level. And so that seems to work pretty well for me. I,
So
I
do you keep plants in most of your aquariums, even though whether it's like hornwort or stuff like that, or do you keep them sterile?
So the only tanks that I don't have plants in are the cichlid tanks.
Mm.
I could with the Maltese, right? They've been kept with plants before, and I may end up doing that. But I found that the Parasiprochromis, I put some hornwort in there and they ate it, which I was a little bit surprised by because you do hear a lot of times Tanganyikans can be kept successfully with plants and seem to do okay. For whatever reason, these guys liked what I put in there, and it was gone within probably a couple of weeks. So I realized that at least that variety of plant was probably not a great idea for them. So, but in general, I do find that it does help make them more balanced. Although I will say that I still feel like balancing tanks for me tends to be a little bit of a battle. Algae kind of can creep in, and I'm still trying some different things. I've added more plants. I stopped using an all-in-one with added nitrates and phosphates, and so now it's got kind of the micro and macronutrients, the potassium, and all of those kinds of different things to try and see if maybe that was part of the problem and that there was just an excess that the plants can't use, even though I've got a decent plant load in there.
Yeah, for me it's weird 'cause it seems the least that I do, the better off I am with my aquariums.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I can. It seems when there's one 10-gallon tank, and I've noticed that when I quit messing with it and just let it run,
Hmm.
uh, the water gets clear. It's the minute that I start doing some sort of a regular schedule on it as far as water changes is concerned. I'm always having this. It's not as clear as my other tanks. I can tell when I look into the tank that there's a slight haze in there. So, the longest I've gone without touching my aquariums was these 2 weeks that we went on vacation. In I had already done about 7 days, and I knew they were fine. But what really impressed me is when I left them for 2 weeks without really touching them, without feeding them, without doing anything. When I came back, I was really impressed how clear almost all my tanks were. And I thought I was going to have some dead fish in there, and everything was fine. But I do tend to run heavily planted tanks for the most part, and there's something to be said, I guess, with that microorganisms growing in your aquariums. And it seems like the less that I fidget with them, the better off I'm doing. And so I kind of got to the point now in the hobby where I'm enjoying more of looking at my tanks than working in my tanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. We've done a number of vacations where we'll go away for could be a couple of weeks, and come back. The fish look just fine, right? And the tanks, they stay nice and clear and Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. In fact, yesterday I did a water change on the 40 breeder that's the planted community, and today it is a little foggy. So obviously I stirred stuff up more than it wanted, and it seems to be clearing throughout the day. But you're right. I think there's got to be a balance that we have to reach around of the how much is enough to kind of keep things healthy and thriving, and when do you get to a point where you've intervened too much.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at this comment by Mandy, talking about uh, the blue Acaros, electric blue Acaros. Uh,
Mm,
in this tank right behind me, I used to have 5 of them. Now I'm down to 1 because I lost 4 of them. 3 of them I lost to a bacterial infection that I just couldn't figure out what was wrong with them. But I think really what it boiled down to was my temperatures just get too hot for me in the summer down here, and that's the only time where I break my rule and I'm actually doing water changes almost every other day, and that's just
mhm.
because of the temperatures. If I don't do a water change, these guys will creep up into the mid 90s. So even though my tap water is coming out in the you know in the 80s, almost mid to high 80s, it's still cooler water than what's in the aquarium. So that's the only time where I really do find myself making a lot of water changes. But once we start going back down to 100 or less, I can keep them pretty regulated at about 82 without a problem, and then I just quit messing with them. But what I was getting at in this aquarium, it's weird because when you were talking about your African cichlids eating the hornwort, I found out that I can't put jungle fowl in this aquarium because the Acaros will nibble on it like if they were eating spaghetti. They start at the tip and they go all the way down to the roots, and it's the only plant they'll do that to. It's weird. But sometimes these fish will decide that they like and what they don't, because what you see in there's a bunch of Amazon sorts, and they leave those alone. They don't need those. But anytime I put Val in there, it's like if I was feeding them their favorite dish.
Well, exactly, right? You somehow figured out what the magic thing is, and they've decided that's their favorite thing in the world, regardless of the fact that you come in and you feed them on a regular basis. They need the plants too. So I was curious to ask you. I'm glad you touched on, because I think your fish room is in your garage in the house,
Yes.
and so you don't have it air conditioned. Or is it climate controlled at all? No.
No. I run floor fans. You know those big
Yep.
like little shop fan,
Yep.
and all I'm basically what I'm doing is evaporative cooling because I don't have tops on most of these aquariums.
I see that.
So
Yep.
so the air that blows over the top will get that moisture and move it around. And like right now, I'm sitting in 88 degrees, but it's only 13% humidity.
Uh,
Outside, it's probably right now about 102, but it's not the peak of our heat. But I do have to crack the garage door open at the bottom. I leave it about an inch open to allow that circulation of air. The only time where I struggle in here is in the evenings, right around 5 o'clock to about 7 o'clock, when the sun is in the furthest west side of our area, and it's beating on the garage door. So that's when the temperatures really shoot up here. But I have to wait till right around 10, 11 o'clock at night to be able to start doing water changes, because by that time the water is only like about 86, 88 coming out of the tap. Um, the other thing that I've seriously considered is putting totes and just letting the fans cool them off all day. But the problem is keeping up with the evaporation, because
mhm.
I'm I'm adding water to all of these. Well, you can see I topped this off last night, um, probably around 10 o'clock at night, and it's already down about 4 inches. That's how much water I've lost in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
So I'm thinking that if I start doing that with the totes, by the time I come back from work, I'll only have half of it.
Yep.
So I don't know if it's going to be worth it or not. Uh, is I am trying to save a little bit of money. I'm seriously consider adding like one of those split units
Uh huh.
that they sell.
Like the
Um,
mini splits.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
seeing that those work real well, especially for the garage area. And now I've kind of gotten my wife to to approve it, give me
Hmm.
the thumbs up, because I've been threading there that we have a spare bedroom. And I said, you know what? Forget this, man. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to set it up in that spare bedroom and put my tanks in there. And she goes, no, you're not. Get yourself a little unit.
Ah, okay.
There. I said, all right, that worked even
Hey,
better.
that's a great idea that you came up with there. Thanks,
Yeah,
honey. Right?
exactly. So, that's where that's going. Now I just got to find, I got to save up the money to get it because they do get a little bit expensive. I've thought about a portable unit with the exhaust on it, but I have to figure out, oh, my lights just came on. I have to figure out a way to port it out. I really don't want to mess around with the roof. So it's either I'm going to have to adapt a board or something that I can put under the garage door, adjust it so it doesn't close all the way down, and I can put the exhaust to come out through there. But it's got to cover the entire length of the door, or else it defeats the purpose.
What about? Do you have a window?
No, there's no windows in
no
this
windows.
garage.
I was gonna say because they make kind of the plastic thing that fits the exhaust, so it goes out and you close the window down on it.
I was hoping that. I mean, and I've seen them, and I was hoping. Well, that could be the other thing. I could put a window in here, and that might be cheaper than buying a split unit. But the problem is, it's all cinder block construction down here, so that's where it gets a little bit trickier.
Yep.
And I've kind of toyed around with that idea. I can really probably get away with using evaporative coolers, like big old portable swamp coolers.
Yep.
Because we're so dry. Like I said, I'm sitting here with all these open tanks, and it's only 13% humidity in the room. So other than when we get into monsoon season, which is about August, is where the humidity starts creeping up, that I might have an issue. But by that time, summer's almost over, and I'm all, I can deal with that.
Yep.
That would not be a problem. So it's just different things. But even those, I've looked at them at Home Depot, but they're about $500-$600 for a good sized one that'll cool my garage. Then I'm going, well, maybe for another $400 or $500, I'll just get an AC unit that'll also have a heater for the winter. So
that'd be nice because how cold does it get there in the winter? Does the fish room stay pretty warm? No.
Yeah, well, we call it cold because it dips into the 40s, but you guys
God.
You guys call it spring.
That's right. That's a comfortable day in like the fall.
That's a shortened t-shirt weather for you guys. That's what the snowbirds say when they come down here and visit. They're looking at us like we're crazy because we were walking around with these, down jackets, and they're like, "What are you doing?" They're walking around in t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops, looking at us like you guys are nuts.
Yeah. My folks live down in South Carolina, and so it's kind of the same when we go visit them, around the holidays or whatever. Like it's a break for us, right? Because it's like 50 degrees during the day, and like my dad's got his coat on and long pants, and I'm like, what is like? You grew up here.
But you know what? South Carolina still gets colder than down here. I remember, it's a memory that is ingrained in my mind because I did basic training in Columbia, at Fort Jackson.
Yeah, and that's where I went to grad school.
Yeah,
was in Columbia.
And I remember I had never ever seen. Well, I had seen snow, but I've never seen water freeze. I've heard about it. I know lakes freeze over.
Yep.
And I vividly remember, like, the second night that we were in processing, waiting for the rest of the group to come in. We're standing on these storms, and I remember that evening coming into the barracks and seeing standing water around the stairways areas, and just looking at it and not thinking anything of it. And while we were there, they were kind of messing with us, and every time, like around 3 o'clock in the morning, they'd set off the fire alarm, so we all had to exit the building until the fire department came and cleared it, make sure it wasn't a fire hazard. But I think it was just their way of psychologically starting to mess with us, because every night, it happened the entire 7 nights I was there. Well, that second night, the first night, nothing happened. It was normal. It was only 3 of us that had shown up, and so they didn't mess with us. But by the second night, we already had a group of 20. So that happens. I remember vividly coming down the stairs and looking over to where that water was, and it was frozen solid. And immediately is when I entered into this like panic mode, going, "Oh, it is really, really cold." And we're standing there and just in our tank top shorts and just the blanket, that wool blanket that you have that you're sleeping with, shivering. And we had to wait about 45 minutes for the fire department to come in and clear the building. And after that, I learned I was sleeping in sweats because I I did not want to have to go through that again. But that's the first time I remember looking on the ground and going, that is solid ice. What was water a few hours ago, now it's solid ice. So South Carolina does get cold. We don't get that down here in Arizona. At least not in the areas I live. You go up north into Flagstaff, yeah, they even get snow. You there, Todd? Oh, did I lose you? Todd, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm
Oh,
there.
okay.
It kind of started lagging on my end. I think we're are we
What could be my end? I don't know. Oh, wow. Well, hopefully he comes back. We're getting close to wrapping it up anyways. We've been on for almost an hour now. I want to thank you guys for joining me and Todd today. Uh, Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Something that I want to do. Oh, here he is. Great. Hey, Todd.
Sorry about that. I don't know what the heck happened. Everything was going fine, and then it started dropping out on me.
Yeah, I was just telling him we're getting close to wrapping it up anyways because it's I think there's somebody else that's streaming
Ah,
uh,
okay.
after or just started, and but it's just I wanted to say thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Coming up here, it was really interesting to get to know you a little bit more. Um, I know that we could spend hours talking about different things. I know if we were to talk about your work, we could be here for hours and days. But I want to thank you very much for joining me. Again, this is a little project that I'm working on. I still haven't determined a time and a date. This is Dr. Anthony's slot, and I just decided to do it today because he told me he wasn't going to stream today, not with the intention of competing with him in any way, shape, or form. Um, and for me, it makes it a little bit difficult too because um, I do work rotating schedules, so it's always a little bit different. But I'll try the next time I do this. I will try to put it out in advance, and hopefully I can find another person that's willing to be my guest and get to know them a little bit better and pay it forward too a little bit, especially if you're really interested in growing your channel. This hopefully this will be an opportunity to give you a little bit more exposure. Not that I draw a lot of people, but it's something that I want to do because it was done for me at one time. And
Yeah, no, I think this was great, right? This was a lot of fun, and I'd encourage, anybody to jump up here and have a great conversation. I think, just a good opportunity and a good chance to get a chance to meet you, and other than just through chatting through your videos and things like that. So again, I had a blast. This was an incredible opportunity. And I thank you for thinking of me. This has been a lot of fun.
oh, no problem. You were easy because you were looking for somebody to have you on as a guest, so that was
Sure.
I could I couldn't pass up that opportunity. It was the perfect excuse to get going from the planning stages to the actual acting on something that I wanted to do.
Yep.
And
Well, anytime, Jorge, I'd be happy to come up and join you if you felt like that was something you wanted. This has been great, and I'd welcome the opportunity to do it again.
well, thank you very much, Todd, and thank you guys for joining us today. Hopefully, you guys were able to learn a little bit more about Todd, and hopefully, you do come around and decide to start posting a little bit more of the stuff that you're doing. I would really find fascinating to see a little video on how you put together your little egg collector,
Mm.
that kind of stuff. I'm always fascinated by that type of content because I do try to breed some of the fish, and I'm always looking for new ideas. I'm always trying something different. I've tried mops. I've tried doing the little Tupperware with rods and stuff like that. But I'm always interested in seeing what everybody else is doing, and some of it works and some of it doesn't. So
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's sometimes it works and better than others, right? And that's one of the things I really like about your channel, right? Is the fact that you like eat simple things like your dirt mix. right? I've watched your video at least a couple of times where you went in and talked about how you do the dirt mix and then you sift it so you get the right consistency that you're looking for, and all those little tips and tricks that if I just sit here and kind of think about it, I'll never come up with.
Well,
And
it's all been trial and error,
yep,
and you know, I like to be able to, because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person that's tinkering with this stuff. I mean, there's only so many things you can do, and to me, it's like, well, okay, I tried, the pouring just the dirt in the tank,
hmm
and I learned what that experience was like. So now I'm going, okay, maybe if I do something a little bit different, I can get a better result,
yep,
and that's how that's come about. And I try to do stuff to share my learning with other people.
yep,
I don't really want to do, because, and not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just I think it's inundated with profiles, top 10 this or the top, you know, there's already a lot of that information out there. It would be pointless for me to do something like that. So I might not post as regularly as some of the other people, but when I do, it's something that either I'm working on, an experience that I've had that I think somebody else would find interesting. So I try to do things a little bit different in that aspect.
yep.
But
No, to me, I find it extremely interesting. So, I certainly enjoy when I see a new video come up from you that I can take a look and see what you're doing in the fish room. So,
yeah, right
yeah,
now
it's
what
great.
I'm really finding interesting is actually getting out to where I work. I mean, I've been there for about a year now, and it wasn't until recently that I actually started exploring my work area to see what's in the waterways. I know there's big, sport fish in there because it's a big fishing recreational area. But you start going into some of these other waterways where you have some seepage from the river or the reservoir, and I'm finding fascinating how much diverse life is in there. So that's kind of where my interest is kind of taking me lately, and I figured I'd share that with some people. Some might find it
Mhm.
interesting, some might not, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, no, that was great. Did anybody ever comment on what those little cichlids were? I mean, that's kind of what they look like.
Dr. Anthony seemed to think they were trouts, and I
Oh,
had shown them to some other pictures that I taken to Steve Warrior Planet Tank, and
yep.
he was the first one that had told me, he goes, those look like trout. I mean,
Oh,
not trout, tilapia.
oh, tilapia.
Tilapia. Sorry. Why did I get that confused? But no, Dr. Anthony said that he thought they were tilapia.
Tilapia. Okay,
And
interesting.
but I'm still going out there my next day that I'm off, and I'm going to go try to catch something, and at least in a specimen container
Yeah,
to take a better picture. I don't want to bring them because I don't have the space to keep them, and I just want to see what it is. That's all. That's really what it is. It's just my
yep,
curiosity.
yep. Well,
But
I'll be looking out for that video when you put it up.
all right. Well, thank you guys again. I've already said it 100 times, but thank you very much. And hopefully sooner than later we'll do this again. And I'll have to find somebody else that's interested in joining me and doesn't mind sharing a little bit about their experience and what they're doing. But
Yep.
other than that, thank you guys, and hope to see you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody.